On the night Father Cándido Aantini disappeared, 12 people were inside the chapel. Only 11 came out. The candles were still burning when they opened the doors. The ritual book lay open on the stone floor. The ropes that had restrained the afflicted woman were still tied to the chair. But Father Aantini was gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no hidden passages, no blood, no body. According to diocesan records dated October 17, 1964, the priest had been conducting a sanctioned rite of exorcism in a small mountain parish 3 hours north of the
take
capital.
This holy symbol.
The ritual was interrupted shortly before
faith.
midnight.
Go in peace.
Witnesses later reported a sudden drop in temperature, followed by what they described as a silence, so heavy it felt alive. Then the lights failed. When illumination returned seconds later, Father Aantini was no longer in the room.
Holds strong.
His disappearance remains
Awakening.
officially classified as unexplained.
What was that?
To understand what happened that night, it is necessary to begin months earlier, before the ritual, before the witnesses, before the church reluctantly authorized intervention. It began with a woman named Isabel de la Torre. Isabel was 32 years old, married, no history of mental illness. According to medical records obtained from San Gerardo Provincial Hospital,
What's wrong?
she had given birth to her
I can't do
second
this
child
anymore.
8 months prior to
talk
the
to me.
events. Nurses described her as quiet and attentive. Her husband, Miguel, worked as a schoolteacher. Their town, Valdemara, was isolated but not primitive. Electricity had reached it years before. Doctors visited weekly. The parish church stood at the center of town, white stone against pine-covered hills. Isabel's first symptoms were subtle. Miguel later told investigators that she began waking at exactly 3:12 a.m. every night. Not approximately. Exactly. He checked the clock repeatedly, unsettled by the precision. When he asked her why she woke at that hour, she said she felt someone standing beside the bed. He assumed stress, lack of sleep, perhaps lingering postnatal anxiety. But the waking became accompanied by whispers. At first, Miguel believed the sounds came from outside, wind slipping through the shutters. But one night, he turned toward Isabel and saw her lips moving in the darkness. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady, yet she was speaking in a low, rhythmic murmur. He shook her awake. She opened her eyes abruptly and asked why he looked frightened. According to Miguel's signed statement, the language she spoke was not Spanish. Over the following weeks, Isabel's behavior shifted further. She avoided the church. This was unusual. She had been devout since childhood. When the church bells rang on Sundays, she covered her ears. Once, during a baptism attended by relatives, she fainted as the priest raised a silver crucifix. Doctors found no neurological cause. Blood tests normal. No sign of infection. A psychiatrist from the city suggested dissociative episodes brought on by exhaustion. Sedatives were prescribed. The sedatives did nothing. Instead, new phenomena emerged. Miguel testified that religious objects in their home were repeatedly found displaced. A rosary that hung by the doorway appeared coiled tightly around the handle of a kitchen knife. A framed image of the Virgin was discovered face down on the floor, with the glass cracked from the inside. Neighbors began to notice changes. Isabel stopped speaking to them. When she did speak, her tone seemed distant, hollow. One neighbor, Dona Teresa, later told the parish that Isabel's gaze felt too old for her face. The first violent incident occurred in early September. Miguel returned home from work to find the nursery door locked from the inside. Isabel was within, seated in a rocking chair. Their infant son lay in his crib, unharmed but crying. Miguel broke the door open. Isabel did not react to the splintering wood. She was staring at the wall. Carved into the plaster above the crib were words etched deep enough to expose brick beneath. The language was later identified by a university linguist as Archaic Latin. Translated loosely, the phrase read, "He is not yours." Isabel's fingernails were broken and bleeding. She claimed no memory of carving the wall. It was at this point that Miguel approached Father Cándido Aantini. Father Aantini had served the Valdemara parish for 12 years. He was 48, educated in Rome, known for patience and restraint. Parish records describe him as skeptical of sensational claims. He had reportedly dismissed 2 previous cases of alleged possession as psychiatric distress. When Miguel requested help, the priest did not immediately speak of exorcism. Instead, he visited Isabel privately. Witnesses say the first meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Afterward, Father Aantini told Miguel to remove all religious objects from the house temporarily. He advised further medical consultation. But his expression, according to Miguel, had changed. 3 days later, during a second visit, Father Aantini brought holy water. According to his handwritten notes, preserved in diocesan archives, the reaction was immediate. He wrote, "Upon contact with the blessed water, subject exhibited convulsive motion inconsistent with voluntary reaction. Eyes opened but pupils dilated beyond normal range. Vocalization occurred in male register, lower than subject's natural range." Miguel stated that Isabel's voice shifted mid-sentence into something layered, as if 2 tones were speaking simultaneously. The priest attempted a brief prayer in Latin. Isabel laughed. The sound, Miguel said, did not resemble her laughter. It was controlled, deliberate. Father Aantini ended the session abruptly. The following Sunday, during Mass, Isabel entered the church unannounced. Witnesses reported that she stood in the back aisle without sitting. When Father Aantini began the Eucharistic prayer, Isabel began whispering again. Several parishioners claimed the candles near the altar flickered violently, though there was no draft. Then Isabel spoke clearly, her voice amplified in the silent church. "You have no authority here." Multiple witnesses confirmed that the statement was delivered in flawless ecclesiastical Latin. Father Aantini stopped mid-prayer. Isabel collapsed seconds later. The bishop was contacted within the week. According to official correspondence, the diocese required extensive evaluation before granting permission for a formal rite of exorcism. 2 independent physicians examined Isabel. Both concluded there was no identifiable medical cause for her episodes. A psychiatric review labeled the condition acute dissociative psychosis, though the psychiatrist privately admitted certain manifestations defied clinical explanation. Father Aantini submitted a 14-page report. In it, he documented temperature fluctuations, spontaneous bruising appearing in symmetrical patterns along Isabel's spine, and episodes in which she appeared to anticipate his silent prayers before he spoke them aloud. He also noted a growing hostility directed specifically at him. "Subject's eyes fix upon me during invocation," he wrote. Expression suggests recognition. Permission for the rite was granted on October 14, 1964. The ritual was scheduled for 3 days later in the old stone chapel adjacent to the main church, a smaller, windowless structure used rarely except for private confessions. 12 individuals were selected to attend: Father Aantini, 2 assisting clergy from neighboring parishes, a physician, Miguel, and 7 parish volunteers to act as witnesses and physical support if necessary. The evening of October 17th was cold. Isabel was transported to the chapel at dusk. According to witness testimony, she appeared subdued, almost calm. Her wrists were loosely bound to a wooden chair at the center of the room, not tightly, but enough to prevent sudden movement. Candles were placed in a circle around her. The physician checked her pulse. Normal. At 9:03 p.m., Father Aantini began the rite. Witnesses later described his voice as steady, controlled. The ritual followed the Roman ritual of 1614, authorized and translated. For the first 30 minutes, there was no response. Then Isabel began to breathe rapidly. At 9:41 p.m., her chair shifted backward, without visible force. 2 volunteers moved to stabilize it. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. The physician recorded a 7-degree decrease within minutes. Father Aantini continued. At 10:02 p.m., Isabel spoke. Not in Latin this time. She addressed the priest directly by name. But she did not say Father. She said his full birth name, Cándido Luis Aantini, followed by a detail no one present could verify. She spoke the name of his deceased sister.
It will be your strength.
Silence filled the chapel.
It with faith.
The priest
Go in
hesitated only briefly before resuming the prayer. Witnesses say the candles nearest Isabel extinguished simultaneously. The room remained lit by the outer ring. Isabel's restraints tightened as her wrists twisted unnaturally against the rope.
Binding holds
At
strong.
10:37 p.m.,
Awakening.
the physician attempted to check her pulse again. He
was
later
that?
stated that as he approached,
There's
Isabel's had turned toward him before he touched her. Her eyes were fully open, completely black, according to 3 separate accounts. Father Aantini raised the crucifix and commanded the presence to identify itself. Isabel's mouth opened wider than seemed physically possible. The response was not a name. It was a statement.
What's wrong?
He is already marked.
I can't do this anymore.
Witnesses reported
Please
that at
talk
that
to me.
exact moment, a cracking sound echoed from the chapel ceiling. Dust fell between the stones, and Father Cándido Aantini felt something brush past his shoulder. He turned. There was nothing behind him, but the air felt displaced, as if someone had just stepped through it. The sensation lingered. Father Aantini later wrote nothing further in his ritual journal after that moment. The final line ends mid-sentence, ink dragged across the page as if the pen had been pulled away. Inside the chapel, witnesses felt the shift immediately. The air grew dense. Several described a pressure in their ears, like descending rapidly in altitude. One volunteer began to pray aloud but lost his voice halfway through the first sentence. Isabel's breathing slowed. Too slow. The physician leaned close again and confirmed that her pulse had dropped to an alarming rate. Yet she did not appear weak. Her posture straightened. The ropes around her wrists strained against the chair. Father Aantini resumed the rite, this time louder. His Latin was precise, unwavering. He stepped closer, crucifix raised. The temperature fell again. Witnesses later estimated their breath became visible. At 11:08 p.m., the outer ring of candles flickered violently. Miguel claimed that shadows on the walls began moving independently of the flame. He insisted that one shadow, taller than any person present, stood behind Father Aantini, though no one occupied that space. Isabel began to speak softly. The words were layered, overlapping. Some witnesses heard fragments in Latin. Others heard phrases in Spanish. The assisting priest, Father Rojas, testified that he heard what sounded like ancient Portuguese. But all agreed on one phrase repeated clearly. "You open the door." Father Aantini did not respond to the accusation. He pressed the crucifix to Isabel's forehead. Her reaction was immediate and violent. The chair struck the stone floor with a crack that echoed through the chapel. 2 volunteers rushed forward to hold her steady. The ropes burned against her wrists as if pulled by opposing forces. Then, abruptly, she stopped struggling. Her head tilted slightly to the side, her gaze fixed not on the priest, but beyond him. Witnesses would later struggle to describe what they saw next. The assisting clergy stated that the walls appeared to darken, as though absorbing light. The physician insisted it was mass hysteria amplified by stress. Yet even he admitted that the candles nearest the altar bent inward, their flames leaning sharply toward Father Aantini. At 11:26 p.m., Isabel began whispering again. This time, the voice was unmistakably male. "You cannot send what is invited." The statement unsettled Father Aantini more than anything before it. Several weeks prior, he had confided privately to Bishop Herrera that during his second visit to Isabel's home, he felt an unusual pull, an almost irresistible curiosity to confront whatever presence might exist. In his own words, he wrote, "There is something that wants to be acknowledged." The bishop had cautioned restraint. Now, standing in the freezing chapel, Father Aantini's voice wavered for the first time. Witnesses reported that he paused mid-prayer and lowered the crucifix slightly. Isabel's lips curled into what Miguel later described as a knowing smile. Then came the sound, not loud, not explosive, but deep, a vibration beneath the stone floor, like distant thunder trapped underground. Several candles extinguished at once. Darkness swallowed half the room. Only 3 candles remained lit near the entrance. The physician moved instinctively toward the door, but found it would not open. He later insisted it felt as if someone were holding it shut from the outside. Father Rojas attempted to assist, pulling at the iron handle. It did not move. Inside the circle of dim light, Father Aantini stood alone before Isabel.
He resumed the rite.
This time, he commanded firmly. According to witness testimony, Isabel's body lifted slightly from the chair, not fully airborne, but enough that the rear legs no longer touched the floor. The ropes stretched upward, Miguel screamed. The assisting clergy began praying simultaneously, their voices overlapping in panic. Father Aantini stepped forward again. He demanded the presence identify its right to remain. Isabel's head snapped upright. Her eyes, previously described as black, now appeared reflective, catching the candlelight in a way that made them seem hollow. The response came slowly. He called us. Silence followed. Then the final candle went out. Total darkness. Witnesses described a silence, so complete it felt suffocating. No breathing. No movement. Even Isabel's previous convulsions ceased. The darkness lasted approximately 12 seconds. When the chapel lights abruptly flickered back on, electric bulbs along the walls that had not functioned all evening, the room appeared unchanged. Except for one detail. Father Cándido Aantini was gone. The crucifix lay on the floor where he had been standing. Isabel remained bound to the chair, breathing normally. Her eyes were closed. The ropes were intact. The door behind the physician swung open effortlessly when tested. There were no signs of collapse in the ceiling. No hidden compartments. No broken stone. The assisting clergy searched every corner of the chapel. They called his name repeatedly. Miguel ran outside into the freezing night, circling the building, scanning the empty courtyard. There was no trace. Authorities were contacted immediately. Local police conducted a search that lasted 3 days. The surrounding forest was combed. Nearby ravines were inspected. Dogs found no scent trail beyond the chapel threshold. Official reports concluded that Father Aantini's disappearance was inexplicable under current investigative standards. Isabel regained full consciousness the following morning in her home. According to Miguel's statement, she had no memory of the ritual. More unsettling still, her symptoms had vanished. No whispers. No aversion to religious objects. When Father Rojas visited her days later, she wept upon learning of Father Aantini's disappearance. She insisted she remembered only feeling, as if something left through me. The diocese quietly reassigned clergy to Valdemara. The chapel where the ritual occurred was sealed for nearly a year. Inside Father Aantini's personal quarters, investigators discovered his final private journal entry written hours before the ritual. It contained a single paragraph. I sense this confrontation is not merely about her condition. There is recognition directed toward me. If there is invitation involved, it may not be hers. The phrase, "you opened the door," echoed in multiple witness testimonies. Some speculate that Father Aantini's earlier curiosity, his desire to confront the presence directly, created vulnerability. Others believe the disappearance was a calculated act meant to protect Isabel from further harm. The church never issued a formal conclusion. No remains were ever found. In 1972, 8 years after the event, a renovation crew briefly reopened the sealed chapel. One worker later reported hearing faint murmuring near the altar while alone inside. The claim was dismissed as imagination. Yet among the original 12 witnesses, none ever spoke publicly again. Miguel moved his family from Valdemara within a year.
Child, take this holy
Isabel
symbol. It
lived
will be your
quietly
strength.
until her death
carry it
in
with faith.
1998.
Go in peace.
She reportedly refused to enter the old chapel ever again. As for Father Cándido Aantini, his name remains in diocesan archives under a single classification: missing during active rite. No explanation. No closure.
Binding holds
And
strong.
in the stone chapel that still stands at the edge of Valdemara, parishioners say the temperature drops noticeably near midnight. Some claim that if you stand in the center of the floor where the candles once formed a circle, you may feel the air shift behind you, as if someone has just stepped through it.